before I forget and start launching into the agenda, I'll turn it over to Stella to give us our introduction.
All right, thanks, Len, and good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all here today. So welcome to today's meeting of the Regional Transportation Advisory Council. Just to kick things off, I will briefly go through some guidelines and notices. So here's our notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.bostonmpo.org/MPO_NON_discrimination. You will probably have joined the meeting today with a muted microphone. You may mute and unmute yourself, but please remain muted unless you're actively speaking. At this point, it would be great if you could rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. And to participate in the discussion, please select the raised hand function. You can find this either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, where a window will pop up with a raised hand button at the bottom. You can also use the reactions button in the toolbar. And if you're joining us by phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand and one of us will call on you. If you're having any technical difficulties or if you have any questions, please reach out to me, Stella Jordan. I am the Public Engagement Program Manager at the MPO. You can reach me via the chat box. You can email me at sjordan@ctps.org, or you can call me at 857-702-3675. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. Again, if you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully, or if you're having any technical difficulties, please do contact me at sjordan@ctps.org or at 857-702-3675. And with that, I will turn it back over to you, Len, for intros.
Great. So were you going to say anything about elections and voting?
Oh, yes, thank you.
No problem.
Yes, so today is an exciting meeting. We are electing the next chair and vice chair of the advisory council. I believe all of you should have received some correspondence about this, and if you are an active voting member, you should have received a couple of emails from me specifically. I am going to drop the link to our electronic ballot in the chat right now. Again, please only use this if you're an active voting member of the committee. If you're unsure about that status, please send me a chat and I can clarify. And if you have not voted in advance, I know a couple of you did, thank you for that. Please go ahead and do so during these introduction sessions, or you can wait until we have the elections. But as you can see on our agenda here, in a few minutes, we're going to be going through the elections. So it would be great if I could have the votes in order to tally and let you all know the results at that point. So again, let me know if you have any questions or if you're having difficulties with this. I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Stella. We have time. I mean, even though there's quite a few of us here, I mean, especially since our former chair is here, I think it'd be good for us to introduce ourselves. I mean, I'm sure she remembers most of us, but some may be new and we have some guests. And so I will just call out names because I find that easier than trying to remember who's been called. And so, Anna Christina?
Anna Christina Figoso, Boston Society of Civil Engineers.
Great, thank you. Andy Rieger?
Good afternoon, Andy Weaker at the City of Cambridge and the Community Development Department. That's the Planning Department.
Great, Andy. Coming in a little low on the volume. David Montgomery.
Hi, David Montgomery, Town of Needham. Hope you can hear me.
Oh, nice, loud and clear, David. Thank you. Ethan LaPointe.
Ethan LaPointe, Boston Region MPO, tip manager with the MPO.
Thank you, Ethan. Franny Osmond.
Hi, Franny Osmond, Acton, Mass, and candidate for vice chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Franny. And Fred Mosley.
Fred Mosley, American Council of Engineering Companies.
Thank you, Fred. Jen Rowe.
Was that me?
Yes.
Okay. Jen Rowe, City of Boston Active Transportation Team.
Thank you, Jen, coming in nice and clearly. John McQueen.
John McQueen, Walk Boston.
Thank you, John. John Stewart. I'm not hearing you, John. And
Pardon, John Seward, Move Mass.
thank you, John. And Owen McDonald.
Owen McDonald, Town of Weymouth.
Thank you, Owen. And Scott Zekis.
Scott Zadakis, the National Rural Transit Assistance Program and outgoing chair, vice chair. Sorry.
Steve Olenoff.
Steve Olenoff, representing the Trick subregion, and I'm not a voter on this because I'm also the alternate representative for Trick at the MPO.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for joining us. See, we have Shaleka Murthy.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shaleka Murthy. I am the Unified Planning Work Program Manager with the staff to the Boston Region MPO.
Great, and I will circle back to Tegan right after public comments. So if you wish to make a public comment, please raise your hand electronically. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. Are you seeing anyone, Stella? Okay, all right, so then we'll go into the first item on our agenda, the update on MPO peer exchanges. And we have Tegan Tyke, the current executive director for the MPO staff and former chair of the advisory council. And she can tell us anything else she wants to tell us about herself. Now, take it away, please, Tegan.
Thanks, Glenn. Actually, I was wondering if you all wanted, since I am not planning, I figured this would just be a conversation. I actually am pleased to say that I recognize every single face on this call, so hopefully everyone feels pretty comfortable. There we go. Yeah, having conversations, so we could kind of do it this way.
Yeah, that's fine.
But yeah, man, I hope, I don't think I need to say too much more, but just maybe I'll mention I'm now, I've wrapped up my 3rd year as executive director now. So it's been 3 years since I was actually on RTAC, which is, I can't believe it's kind of been that long. And I think what I came here today to talk about is that certainly my plans for what my priorities would be for the first 5 years or so have had to face some adjustments in terms of the pandemic and working from home, and like all of our lives, there's been some change. But over the last, I would say, 6 months to a year, I've been able to really turn a little more outward again. And I've had some great interactions. Both, we had a formal peer exchange with the Miami-Dade MPO here back in the summertime. And then also I joined the board of the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations. CTPS, the Boston Region MPO, became a member again for the first time in a number of years. I think last year, and then this year I went for and got a seat on the board. So I've had kind of an extra, an extra access into the staff and the other MPOs that serve on the board. And then I've also been able to, of course, I prioritized attending the conferences this year. So it's been great to have this exposure to other MPOs and how they're working. And I think the intent of today's conversation was just to talk a little bit about what we have seen over the last year and just have a conversation with you all about what you're interested in. Does that sound about right, Len? Uh-oh, you're muted. Still muted. Maybe I should just start talking.
Yeah, sorry.
There we
Yeah,
go.
you're fine. I lost my screen. I hit the wrong button and then I was off on another virtual screen. So you can see me, but I couldn't see you. So yes, it's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Tegan, can you
yeah.
can you repeat the organization that you joined the board of?
Yeah, so the acronym is AMPO, which is much easier to remember, but it is the Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations. So it is the National Association specifically for MPOs. And it's an interesting organization because there's another organization called NARC, which is a funny acronym, but that's the National Association for Regional Planning, no, Regional Commissions, I guess. So that's sort of the RPA level national association. So for us, like MAPC, which is our fiduciary agent as the MPO, they belong to NARC, and we as an MPO belong to AMPO. But across the country, as you probably already know, a lot of times my organization and MAPC are one organization. And so a lot of them have dual memberships or only have one membership. And so there's all this kind of interesting overlap, but this is really the MPO focused one. And so very relevant for us to be directly a part of. So if you like, I can, again, I really like this to be a conversation with you all and my cats, apparently. But I can just kind of summarize a few points or takeaways from the July peer exchange and just kind of enter into a conversation. I'm happy for you to interrupt me anytime. I can also summarize a few takeaways from the national conference that I just went to at AMPO and what I'm seeing amongst MPOs across the country. But the Miami-Dade peer exchange, I just have some notes over to the side, which is why I'm looking, was back in July. And some of the folks here actually attended that as well. So you all can weigh in too. So Len was there for about half the time, I think, Len in person, right? And Jen, you were there the entire time. It was actually hosted at BPDA or the city of Boston. So that was really fantastic for us. And thank you for hosting us. At the time, we didn't have any good space to do this kind of event, and you all were very, very accommodating. We also had some other attendees from the city of Boston, Jim Fitzgerald and Bill Conroy, who are representatives on the MPO board. We had Tom O'Rourke. So, you know, Steve mentioned that he's an alternate. Tom O'Rourke is the TRIC representative, and then Steve is the alternate for him. And then we also had Jennifer Constable from the town of Rockland. So I actually would have loved to have seen more board members there, but it was a quickly organized event. And it was, you know, kind of on an off time compared to the normal MPO meetings. And so I think there was kind of a limited ability for folks to kind of come in person and participate. But I still think it was a great conversation. First thing that to kind of note about Miami-Dade and the conversation is that the folks who were there from Miami-Dade, other than staff, were primarily elected officials. And that is really common with MPOs across the country. It's definitely not, you know, like 99% of MPOs are primarily elected officials, but I probably more of the majority of them. So there's often just a very strong elected representation versus our board. Typically, there's the elected member that is the official member, but then there's designees and alternates, and those are the ones who typically come to the board meetings. So they tend to be representatives from the city staff or others. So it's just sort of an interesting difference between our MPO and a number of MPOs, but we're not alone in that structure. It's just a way in which we are slightly different than Miami-Dade. So there was a lot of electeds, and so the conversation might have been different than if it were, you know, more technical staff, I think. One of the things so what we did was we presented a few areas of our work, and then they presented a few areas of their work, and we kind of ended up discussing our initiatives in resiliency and long-range planning. And then what Miami-Dade really focused on talking to us about was a whole number of initiatives that they've been carrying out in branding around advancing express bus rapid transit, not full, but BRT in cases, but kind of a mixture of enhanced bus services. And they've really kind of branded this like multi-stage process to implement that throughout their region. So that was kind of the focus. The other thing that we did talk about was the structures, because one of the things that our board has been interested in is understanding the different structures of MPOs. And that also leads into a number of different interesting things that I talked about with others at the AMPO National Conference. So why don't I pause there and just see if Len, Jen, you know, others who were there wanted to add anything, or if you have any specific questions about that specific peer exchange, or want to talk a little bit more broadly about MPOs across the country.
Jen, you want to, well, Jen, if you want to say something, please do, and then I'll go to John, and then maybe I'll say something.
Yeah, I thought that was a great summary, Tegan. Yeah, I think I was struck by how different the structure was, or like the feel of what they did. I think a lot of their work was very flashy, like they kind of, and like they were very, I mean, in some ways it kind of tracked with what you were saying about like they were tended to be more like high level politicians involved, and so they really wanted to I think it was very important to them that they showed, like, really pitch this kind of thing, which was, I think, very different than I guess I see our MPO, like kind of trying to help connect people, being more of a facilitator role, but less of a like finding like coming up with like a very like not necessarily out there, but like reach vision and like pitching it and like really. So that was kind of an interesting thing, and like I could both see that being something interesting to see if like to see the MPO lead on, and maybe with different administrations in the state, and I don't know, like maybe that's something we could like try on or like see how that could fit into the MPO's role. But it was very, very different than kind of what I was used to. And then on the other end, though, it was also interesting because when the conversation went into a little bit more technical topics, you could very much see that the folks there maybe were less versed in some of the nitty gritty of like, how do you like the trade-offs for street parking, or like they were very impressed with some of the things we were doing. I think also particularly with climate change, and some of that you can like understand with the politics of Massachusetts and Florida. But anyway, it was a very fascinating thing to see the very different tone and different kind of approaches.
Yeah, actually, and yeah, to elaborate that, I think so much of the discussion was around communication about these ideas, which again, it made sense in that environment. Something else that occurred to me while you were talking is that they have, so this is something that's talked about generally, some MPOs have leaner staff relative to the funding and then the population that they have, and do a lot more through consultants. And so I think Miami-Dade is one of the examples where they have a much smaller number of staff than I would expect for a 2.5 million person region, whereas we're more around like 3 million. They only have, I can't remember off the top of my head, I'm sorry, maybe like 15 staff or something like that. That's a lot smaller than CTPS's 50 to 60 staff. But again, they outsource a lot of their initiatives and work, whereas we kind of maintain a lot of technical expertise on staff. So there's a big difference there in terms of the structure and the way it works.
John?
Hi, Tegan. My question is a little bit similar to what Jen was bringing up, based on the concentration of the electeds that you were dealing with. What was their reaction to, or were they originating any of these reach ideas and also making them actionable in terms of, let's say, electrification of transit, trains, buses, and or vision zeros or such like that? Were they a little closer to the vest and things like filling potholes, or?
It's a good question. So I think that they were focused on being pretty visionary and kind of doing big projects, or at least that's what they talked about, right? Because that's certainly something that's easier to talk about. So they really celebrated being award-winning and innovative. One of the other things they really celebrated was being part of a 3 MPO consortium, and that they were sort of, they were stepping in even on behalf of others. There's supposed to be like a rotating chairship of that consortium, but like this MPO was really at the forefront of leading that consortium. They were very proud of those initiatives and definitely didn't talk much, at least in our meeting, about potholes. You know, they were really there to see the greatest and best of bus priority. They were on their way to Europe to do a peer exchange in Europe. So their board does a lot of kind of peer exchange. So they're really looking for that kind of really innovative interventions. They also, interestingly, just a little bit different, they get their match from the county, I believe, through tolling funds that are collected. And so for them, it's like, it's their initiative, federal money, they provide the match, they're doing that work. So I would much more categorize what we heard from them, at least in a different area than what you're talking about, John, in terms of like the potholes and the kind of the good basic work that needs to be done too.
Thanks. Christina?
I just had a quick question as far as any pros and cons you could pick up as far as them being so lean and outsourcing. And also, when they joined the consortium, were the other MPOs also as lean?
That's a good question. And off the top of my head, I don't know the leanness of the other two. One of the other two in the consortium is actually the director of that MPO as a board member on AMPO. So I haven't like really dug into his staff structure with him or looked it up. I do think that there's pros and cons. I think that there is a huge benefit. Obviously, I'm a little bit self-interested here, and having this deep expertise and knowledge of the region, like on staff, and being able to kind of do this work from the perspective of the public sector and the mission, versus sort of working with consultants and farming it out in that sense. However, there's a lot of, it's nice, predictable, and reliable to have a very small, like, core set of staff and be working with consultants to do kind of the bigger, grander parts of the work. I think very few people that I've heard of that do use consultants, it seems less likely that they're going to have consultants do the core planning products that we as MPOs are expected to do. So the long range plan, the UPWP, the TIP, the public engagement plan, et cetera. So I think often those are kept in-house, although maybe not exclusively. And then it's sort of like the other work that we do and the other initiatives that we engage in that end up being more of a consultant-based process. I will say that as the Boston MPO, we are looking into doing a consultant-based process for the first time in my knowledge of our history. So we applied on behalf of the MPO. The MPO applied for a Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, which is a multi-million-dollar grant that would do a region-wide safety action plan and engage municipalities all across the region. And that is at a scale that we cannot simply, step up and do in-house, out of the blue. It's about half of our usual annual budget, right? So that's a huge difference. So that will be a big, large consultant effort, but we typically haven't done that kind of bigger one-off process. And so this enables us to do something much more, I think, innovative and far-reaching, and kind of take advantage of this unique opportunity of funding at the time. So that's kind of like a pro of being able to engage a consulting team when you do need to.
Andy?
It's working. Hopefully my audio is a little bit better now.
Yes,
too.
it is. Yes, it is. Thank you.
So it's interesting to hear kind of the things that you all learned. So I have two questions. Would you want to seek opportunities like this with other MPOs in the future to do these kind of peer exchanges? And two, kind of following up on what you just said, beyond the Safe Streets grants program, are there other opportunities that you see where we may want to take that consultant route in some of the MPO's work beyond just kind of that immediate, like, next potential project?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so two different questions. First of all, working with doing peer exchanges with other MPOs, I absolutely. I think it's really important. MPOs, they're grounded in federal legislation, and so there are a set, a set of things that we have to do as MPOs. It is amazing, though, the range that you see across the country in terms of what MPOs prioritize, how they operate, what their relationships are with their states and with their federal partners. I mean, there's just such a range out there that I think that it's very easy when you're in your own MPO day in and day out, you don't even realize that there are different ways to do things that may or may not make sense, right? And there's also a lot of assumptions around what can and can't be done. And that when you start having conversations, you realize that some of those assumptions, sometimes they're wrong and sometimes they're right, and that's great to know. So I just think that the power of peer exchange is huge. And in talking to folks at AMPO, I'm trying to sort of build a network of folks to think about reaching out to, even just to share on very specific topics. And AMPO staff is also helpful at linking, at least directly linking me with leadership at other MPOs to be able to kind of explore some of those conversations. Like recently I was talking to an MPO that was launching a strategic plan because we had just done a strategic plan. So we talked specifically about that aspect of the work. On the other question, which was around engaging consultants in other kinds of initiatives. So I think there's a couple areas that as we move forward that are already kind of coming up as an area to explore. So no, right now, no plans exactly. We need to go through this process. So NAPC is very used to sort of engaging consultants and working with these kinds of contracts. And there are our support and our administrative support in terms of working with these contracts. And our expertise as CTPS, we just haven't been practicing that. So this is a really great way for us to learn from them and to figure out how well it works for us as an organization. The other kind of opportunities I see going forward, certainly with additional discretionary grant opportunities, that's an obvious opportunity, I think, for us, because those are discretionary. They happen in a discrete period of time. We're not going to staff up for those things and then shrink back down. So those are obvious opportunities. Some of the other areas that folks have been talking about, something in our strategic plan that we're really interested in doing a few years down the line is expanding our technical assistance program as an MPO ourselves. But beyond that, there's certain things that we can do. But if we're starting to try to do things like support more municipalities or actually trying to implement findings from the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant, for example, and we can get additional funds to do things like that, that's something that we would also potentially want to maybe get consultants on call to be able to use across multiple municipalities as an example, right? Nothing like that is set in stone, but it's one thing that's been discussed. Another thing that was discussed at the ad hoc committee that the board members participated in to talk about TIP readiness issues. And when we talked about, made a policy for including projects in the TIP now only after 25% design submission instead of PRC submission. One of the things that the board members were interested in is talking again about how can we better support municipalities in getting to that level of design, given that it takes a lot of investment, and asking ourselves, can we use funding that we have available to us, either TIP funding or otherwise, to fund consultants that can help with conceptual design and like getting them to that point. So those are things that have been talked about. They all have kind of barriers to getting there, but I think that it's very worthwhile to continue these conversations because it does open up new opportunities for us.
So John, I see your hand, but you've gone already. So I'm going to say something and then I'll come back to you. But I mean, I'm happy to have you come back for more comments, John. So just be clear on that. Okay, so one thing I was impressed with is how similar some of the problems they encountered are in Florida and where Massachusetts but they talked about density issues, and they have their NIMBY issues, which are very similar to ours, and so they were very wary from or aware, of the constraints, of their plans by having to deal with those issues, and even though they are spread over, or they're conglomeration of 3 MPOs, they were still nonetheless impressed that we are a conglomeration of 100 municipalities, and so I think even though they are 3 MPOs, I think the number of municipalities maybe like 27 in the 20s to 30s, so much, much smaller number, and I'm not sure the nature of those municipalities either, because my understanding is that there aren't many parts of the country where you're dealing with town meetings, and we all, those of us who deal with town meetings, know what animals they are, but I think ultimately it's a strength because it really forces us to learn how to work together. And one thing I think that, I don't know if the MPO can provide this. It might be something that has to come out of State House or maybe out of the executive branches, is someone that really coordinates with the municipalities, and provides them with a point where they can easily go and kind of find out what's going on with the other municipalities. And like when we come out with these corridor studies, if we're really going to try and do stuff, I think would help for someone to have a sense of where people are with their town meetings, like what articles are on the agendas, what articles are on the warrants, and what do you need to advance, on the next warrant in order to get what you want. Because I just think that's missing, and I don't think it's any one person's role to do it, but I think we really need to make it someone's role to do it. I'll just stop there and go back to John. Thank you.
Well, before you go to John, do you mind, Len, if I just say one thing?
Sure.
I think that the MPO does have a role in that. I don't think it'll answer all of that need, but one of the reasons why we just recruited for a person to support capital planning in the TIP project is because I don't think that there's enough capacity in one person to even do the kinds of regular connection and conversations with all of the TIP proponents that we have, because we have so many. When I talk to the other MPOs in the state, you know, they have so fewer projects that they're able to actually be in touch with their division, their district office, sorry, the division office. I always forget district or division, I apologize. Their mascot district office and the cities and towns that do actually have the projects that are in play in the TIP. For us, that's such a huge number that we can't have one person trying to sort of bridge that gap in dialogue. And so we're trying to increase our capacity and increase our coordination across all of those proponents. But it's a lot, and we'll only play one part of that role, but it's something we definitely aspire to do more of.
Great, thank you. So, John?
Yeah, my question's kind of verging on what you were talking about, Len, is for the groups down in Miami-Dade, does their area of coverage really reflect all of, let's say, the sphere of movement and the relevant population? For instance, I've always most recently felt that our MPO borders should maybe be more expanded to include on a unified basis places like Worcester, which is a very relevant to and from, let's say, Spoke and Wheel, into Boston, LMA, et cetera, that there's a inbound and an outbound reverse commute, obviously, that goes past the MPO's borders, but should be planned for and coordinated. Same might be true with Lowell, where it's fragmented, and it tends sometimes, I guess, to get more siloed and confused and perhaps less equitable because of the borders. Were they subject to that? Did they have a broader sense? Because Florida is a different animal. I mean, those areas, is Miami-Dade really part of, are they including, let's say, Palm Beach or Naples or Orlando or whatever? They probably aren't.
The consortium does. I believe. So the consortium is between Broward, Palm Beach, I think, and Miami-Dade. So I think that's exactly why, my guess is that was a huge driver, right? In terms of developing that consortium was because of the fact that we're constantly traveling between those MPO regions. And so they really have now this structure, this organization around making sure they're coordinating across those boundaries. In terms of our MPO boundaries, I agree with you that it's incredibly important that Worcester is not, you know, divorced from the Boston region, that Lowell is not divorced from the Boston region. There's all this flow back and forth. I want to, you know, I think my friends who run the MPOs that are responsible for those areas, I don't know that any of us think that we would be able to be as efficient if we were one giant MPO. But what I think we all recognize is we need to be really proactive and aggressive about how we're coordinating with each other. And so I've started a number of regular conversations directly with the folks leading the MPOs across the state, because I think the one-on-one conversations are needed. And then there's also a transportation managers group, which is kind of a subset of the RPA coordination that happens, where all of the MPO directors get together on a monthly basis and talk about issues. But I think there's more we need to do to make that coordination good. But I'm not going to advocate at this point for expanding our boundaries, because I feel like that would be a pretty massive task to undertake, and I don't want to offend my really wonderful friends in Merrimack Valley and Central Mass who are doing really great jobs with their regions.
Well, maybe we can reach out to the advisory councils in these other MPOs, John.
Yeah.
You know, that was something that I had said that I would try to do in the first or second year, and did not do it. You know, it wasn't because I lost interest or didn't have interest. In fact, Matt Archer actually got me the list of other advisory councils. It's just that our agendas, you know how I kind of negotiated to get some extra time, you know, for these meetings. I mean, our agendas get pretty full, but maybe we could do like side meetings or something like that with our fellow advisory councils across the state. So Andy?
Thanks for another chance to ask a question. So I know that it sounded like the in the peer exchange group, probably more electeds than maybe comfortable in terms of like, some of the technical things that you all may have wanted to get into. But I do think that we can always kind of coalesce around the ideas of certain outcomes of the process. And I'm wondering if there's anything that you would want to highlight based on some of the outcomes that they're pursuing. Of course, it sounds like there's a lot of communications outcomes that were really impressive, but are there some more stuff that might be good for the RTAC to be kind of aware of that seem to really stand out for maybe some of the technical things that they're doing or some of the other kind of outcomes that we all want out of our planning processes?
I would welcome others also saying what you think about this. One of the things that really struck me is how, and this may not be exactly what you're asking about, Andy, it may not be technical enough, but I think one of the reasons why they've made such advances in some of these kind of initiatives they've been doing is because they've really managed to establish priorities. So like priority towards public transit, 100%, that's what the money's going to. They're going to fund public transit. And then they also have other like a smart STEP program, I think, which is really focused on bike TED facilities, and a smart demonstration program, which is focused on like first last mile, kind of more minor connections. And it's more demonstration based to get the funding. So they really were pretty aggressive about stating their priorities and then just like making the technical work reflect those priorities and then getting these things done and implemented. So I don't know if that sort of speaks to what you're saying. And I don't know if, Jen, anything else kind of really struck you in terms of, I know we talked a lot about complete streets, they're very focused in that area, but again, they talk more about the politics of the complete streets kind of implementation process than the technical side of it.
I mean, I didn't get any sense of what their advisory councils are like. I mean, in fact, I'd have to go to, I guess all MPOs have to have advisory councils, is that right? Tegan?
So they have to accomplish a certain level of like representation, but what's interesting is when I look at, there's been surveys done about committees that exist sort of across the country, and it doesn't actually show that everybody claims to have an advisory council or something like an advisory council. So I think some people work around the requirements in different ways, but at least the majority should.
Right. Yeah. Well, certainly when we're doing the strategic plan, there was some interesting research that was done, by the consultant, and I had sent that back to you, Tegan, in the process of sending it to Stella, because I've mentioned the desire, to do some more resident/citizen engagement, around the notion of educating people in order to create a pipeline of people who understand transportation and the MPO process, so that we can develop more, well, just residents, period. Diversity would be nice too, and but just a number of people who are interested and understand the material, because it is hard for people to get up to speed on this. You just need someone, who it's been introduced, and kind of stays with it, for years, so that when the time is right for them, they are ready to become a part of the board or whatever openings there are, for people who understand transportation, and of course understand their neighborhood, and the people in the region. So I don't know if I'm free to distribute that further, but if so, I'll be happy to do so. But certainly, I want to pursue some, at least learning about them a bit. I did a little bit of that earlier this weekend. They're pretty interesting, and I don't know how many more of those there are. Certainly of the MPOs that were presented to us in the strategic planning process, they were the only ones that had that kind of citizen academy or initiatives. And in terms of doing more of the connecting to other MPOs, so I really think we could do it remotely. I know people feel that there's something about having people in the room, and yes, there is. But the quantity that you can accomplish by doing things remotely, I think more than compensates for that, and certainly if we do anything joint, with the MPOs, other advisory councils in the state, I'm going to advocate strongly for doing that, at least initially, remotely. So that's all I have to say on that. So Scott and then Jen.
Yeah, I was just going to say that from my somewhat limited research on other MPOs that I've noticed, and I was curious what others have seen, but it seemed to me like a lot of even the advisory councils were a lot more high-level officials, like a lot of town managers and those types of people. And I was wondering if we're like kind of unique in that you can just be a citizen and you could be like from different organizations and groups in the area. Is that out of the ordinary? Because it's from what I've seen, it seems like the few that I've looked at, they're just a lot of like it's like almost a requirement that you're like in city government or something like that.
Yeah, and I'll just tag on to that. Is it intentional? For those who've been around for a long time. So Tegan?
I haven't been around for as long as a lot of folks on this call have, but I don't know the answer to that, honestly, Scott. I don't know what the breakdown looks like. I do know that a lot of MPOs do function with the idea of elected being at the policy board level with like much more limited policy board conversation, just shorter meetings, less of the kind of the detail, and that a lot of the work happens in committees, whether they be advisory committees like this or, specific technical committees or like different, functional area committees. That's a structure that is common out there. And so the technical staff or the other representatives tend to be at that committee level, whether it be advisory council or otherwise. And then the electeds are kind of at that policy board level informed by the committees. But that doesn't answer your question about the advisory councils in general. And I don't know the answer to that question. It'd be very interesting to know more about it and certainly something that we can explore a bit more.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Jen?
Thanks. Yeah, I kind of been crunching on something Tegan mentioned earlier that made a lot of sense to me. And so I'm not sure how fully formed all this, but I figured I would share. I think that was it was a very excellent point, that the difference in terms of like the Miami-Dade MPO having their own sense of like county funds that they could use to match projects. And it had me reflect a little bit about what I feel like in the Boston region, because there are so many municipalities and that and there's like less of it's harder for any one municipality like to take kind of lead in terms of vision and move kind of bigger projects forward. Maybe Boston and Cambridge, like there's like some like folks like who definitely like kind of can make examples, but it's hard for even our mayor to like get what she wants out of the MBTA sometimes, right? And I think in a state at the moment, I don't think the state, like whether it's MassDOT or the MBTA, haven't necessarily like I think they've moved certain initiatives forward, but they haven't been at least this administration like very kind of super forward thinking and moving really big like plans forward. So it's kind of hard, like where does the vision come from in that kind of situation? And I feel like often it's come from in our region like advocacy groups and like foundations, Bar Foundation, Boston Foundation. We have all these like different research institutions that have been bringing that vision or like trying to at least influence the vision of other entities. So anyway, that I was just reflecting on that, and I was thinking of like what other pieces besides a vision does one need to produce transformative things? And I think some of that's like connecting and people who have visions to like how to move them forward. There's like the expertise one might need to move through various processes, and then there's funding. And so I feel like one of the things maybe the MPO, like because we don't have our own set of matching funds, like it's harder to kind of, yeah, move a particular vision forward. But one of the things that I think the MPO does well and could do really kind of lean into is that connecting piece, and both like kind of in the way that Len was talking about, of like how to bring people who care a lot about transportation but don't know where to go, because like there's so many different entities doing transportation and it's very confusing if you're just like a resident to understand how to tap into this and how to like push something you care about forward. And then also the municipal connecting municipalities and kind of, so anyway, I think that all that goes to like, I think personally I would love it if our region had actual funds we could use to move things that are of benefit to us forward. But short of that, I'm wondering about like, what are the ways we can maximize the connective ability of the MPO, and like, are there people, like, can we bring people on staff who are really skilled in building relationships and facilitating consensus and like political advocacy almost. And because I think we have a lot of it, or my sense was, at least when I was on staff, is like, and from what I've seen too, like lots of technical expertise in terms of transportation planning and modeling and whatnot. So many thoughts. Sorry to throw this all out there.
So I'll let Tegan respond to that. I'll have something to say on the vision thing unless Tegan says it too. And then maybe some concluding remarks from Tegan, and we'll move on. But if someone who hasn't asked a question wants to ask a question, we'll bring you on. All right, thank you. Tegan?
Yeah, Jen, a very simple answer is I agree with you. I think that that's an important role for our MPO to play, is trying to make those connections, and we need more of our resources focused on doing that than we have had in the past. And so we have made some steps in that direction. You know, Stella is here part of a newly formed communications and engagement team, which I think was a big step for us to sort of break out that work as its own independent, highly valued like aspect of the work we do across the organization as a whole. Sort of the intent of having that formulated as its own group, not to silo it from things, but to sort of elevate that work across the agency. When we are hiring people now also and thinking about positions, thinking exactly about that, communication and coordination being a really important element of a lot of the positions. And we have some more coming out, I think, in the coming months that will also kind of help advance our ability to do that. So I'm not sure we're getting there like very rapidly, but I think we've made some good significant steps with the MPO to do that. The other thing that I think that I've realized has been really important that I've been able to start reprioritizing, as I mentioned, is building that relationship across the MPOs in the state and just having linkages that way, right? To some of the questions here. So I agree. And I guess another thing I'll just say that's really interesting is that, you know, I think that our board has a really interesting place where our board is given sort of the ability to prioritize its own subset of funds, right? The board can set priority for and score what we call the target funds for the projects, which are the ones that we most talk about. But there's a whole slew of other projects that are in the STIP, the TIP from the state and from the MBTA that use federal funds that the board kind of formally approves. But that prioritization process is not the board's prioritization process, it's the MBTA's and the state's prioritization process. And I'm not saying anything good or bad about that. It's just that it's very clear that there are different prioritization processes that are happening through this one process of the MPO board approving the allocation of all of these federal funds. And so it feels very disjointed in that way as well. And it's really hard to bring those things together because of sort of the MPO's role vis-a-vis the state, the MBTA, you know, the feds. So that's a challenge we really face in our region, which isn't the same in other regions. In other regions, the board has no discretionary funds or target funds that it then programs, but it is more engaged directly with the state prioritization process all the way through. So like Portland, I think Maine was a really good example of somebody who's talking about that difference. So there's a lot to explore there, a lot. But I hope that didn't go too off tangent as to what you were saying.
Well, that's really, it's exciting to hear the things that are, in motion in that direction. And also, it's another important component too. So thanks.
And when you talk about state visions, just stop me if you've heard me say this before. It's the future transportation report. It had, I think it was 3 different scenarios, and the one that I thought works best is the one where you have these 5 regional areas, Lowell, Boston, Fall River, Worcester, and Springfield, and they would all have very good transit, in those regions and then connect it. And so I saw training during the North-South Rail Link, and I could see that being a nice link from Fall River up to Lowell. And I think it's very doable, and yeah, it's very doable. It just needs the will and the money, to do it. And maybe, question one, which I heard was just Paul, can help provide maybe not the funds for it, but maybe that notion that there's a drive in the state, to do stuff, with transport transit. I think we give people a really good vision, even if they don't agree with all the details. They have a good sense of where you're going. They'll fall in behind you, and by falling in behind you, it's like they engage in the process, and become part of it, and want to drive towards, that goal. So if someone in the new administration says they're going to do another thing like that, like that future transportation commission report, I'm going to climb to the top of one of the Zachem spires, which is kind of out my window, and just yell, "No, we have one already." Anyways, well, thank you so much, Tegan. If you want to say some closing remarks, please have at it.
I mean, only just to say that I'm always very happy to come here, to come back and to have these conversations. I think they're really healthy. I really think that while virtual meetings have kind of expanded numbers and access, I think we need to spend more time and energy making sure we're facilitating what's really a conversation like this. And I've been trying to prioritize that a bit more in my work life lately. And I'm also really excited about what I know Stella is working with you, Len, and the committee on, in terms of really refining and enhancing what we can do together, and the role of the advisory council in the MPO process. And so I'm very excited as that's moving on. And I think this is also relevant to that the MPO itself has been talking about developing an operations plan and making sure that the advisory council is appropriately kind of looped into that process and planning. So I think there are many more conversations to come, and I'm always happy to come back. So thanks for the time and for the conversation.
Yeah, well, thanks for expressing a desire to come. So you were the one that initiated this one. So thank you so much. And we'll see you around. You can stay around for as long as you want, of course, because
I'll listen for a while if you don't mind.
Yeah, because next on the agenda, is someone to discuss our favorite topic, the UPWP. Shaleka.
Hi, Lynn, and hi, everyone. I have some slides, but as I was talking with Stella about preparing for this meeting, I really wanted to frame it as a conversation. I have a presentation prepared, but I really want this to be much more of a discussion. I'm really looking for some feedback on how the process went last year from your perspective, and I have a couple dates to share looking ahead to 2024, and then I really just want to open it up to hearing any study ideas you might have, any feedback you might have to share, and just how you'd like to see development go this year. I'd probably just go to the next slide. So this is the rough timeline that we're working with. This is, of course, subject to change, and we haven't just yet gotten approval from the committee yet. We're still, of course, very early in the development process. But right now we are conducting our sub-regional outreach meetings, RTAC included. We are meeting with all the different sub-regional groups, and at the very least having an informative conversation about what the UPWP is, how it's funded, and how we and our opportunities to engage. We have also opened up our survey. It might be going through a few edits in the next week or so, but you are still able to submit study ideas. Along with our survey that we have done every year, Stella and I have developed a couple guidelines to go along with it about essentially just what makes a good study proposal, and how and what staff really look for when we're evaluating proposals. So we hope that if you do choose to submit a proposal and you just consult those guidelines and as always, you are more than welcome to reach out to me for questions or clarification or to bounce ideas off of. But that's kind of where we are now in this October to December period. In January and February, we'll be closing the survey and we'll be closing submission of study ideas. And we'll also begin the process of updating the UPWP text itself. Between March and April, we'll develop the universe of proposed studies that we develop based on the proposals that we receive through sub-regional outreach, through the survey, and through a staff survey as well. And we'll begin the process of finalizing the document for the 2024 UPWP. Between May and June, we will be having conversations with the committee to finalize discrete studies and to prepare the document itself for public comment and endorsement. And we are hoping to release the document itself for comment in June, July, and have it endorsed by August. So that's kind of what the next 10 months look like. Next slide, please, Stella. So where we are now in terms of engagement, the main way that I think folks can engage with studies or with work that will be undertaken in the coming months is to provide input on project scoping. In the coming MPO meetings over the next few months, staff will begin presenting work scopes for approval. And of course, at MPO meetings, there are opportunities for public comment. We'll also, as I mentioned, have the survey open, and you are more than welcome to submit a study idea or a request for technical assistance. And like I said, I'm very happy to assist in any way that I can. Next slide, please, Stella. So I just have a couple of thoughts up here to frame our discussion generally. What can be improved about the development process this year? How do you see your role in UPWP development as members of the advisory council? And if you have any specific opportunities for partnership on engagement, study submission, or universe development. So I know I kept it kind of short and sweet, but I really do want to hear from you. So you can open it up to questions, conversation.
Okay. Let me pull up my participants list so I can see who has their hand up. I guess, so John Queen, and then Franny.
Thank you for that outline. I think versus last year didn't seem to unfold as well as it has in the past. I guess that's been my overall thoughts. What was presented to us as the advisory council, or even to the 3Cs committee, was a document far short of the universe of studies, potential studies that we've been used to getting earlier and having opinions on and being part of the screening process. For instance, I just looked back to March 24th of 2021 in the 3C meetings. Our document that we reviewed then was a 7-page document of various studies that we were able to give opinions on, add to. There were some of suggestions that came from the advisory council. There was room for us to opine in terms of the screening and deletion or addition of projects or the shaping of another project. Earlier on, what came to us in actually late spring was more of a finalized one-pager almost that really had been pre-screened and was essentially asking for us to rubber stamp it without having a real option to view what might have been other studies or changes to them or additions or whatever, but to at least understand what the universe was and be part of that. So that was, I think, it didn't use the advisory council, in my opinion, to its best advantage. In the past, there have been some very good suggestions and inputs that you weren't able to get, or that if you got them, you didn't include them. Not you personally, but the process, the UPWP process. Just my comment. It started, obviously, even what we saw in that March 24th, 2021 document was not even the first time that we'd been exposed to it. That was because I saw that there were some suggestions, for instance, one from Len on bus electrification that had obviously evolved from an earlier submission of potential UPWP. So it would help to start earlier in terms of getting to us with more options to review what you have in mind and to add to it. That's my short. Thank you very much.
Ms. John Franny?
Yeah, I would, I always think the look afterward as to what happened last year and what the outcome was would help me in the following year's sharing of opinions about it. Like, one thing that would be really interesting to hear is the people who put together the list finally after getting all the input, if they could give some examples of ways that they were influenced ever by the input from RTAC, for example, and say, when originally this started, this idea came from here, we were considering it in this way, and then at RTAC, people mentioned they wanted this or this, and sort of some anecdotal evidence of how the decision making worked, to sort of give me a sense of where I, as a member of RTAC, fit in the decision-making process. Because in addition to the sort of rubber stamp feel that, if I understood John right, that he was mentioning, sometimes well, for me, because I'm not a professional transportation planner, sometimes it's an overwhelming task. But I end up feeling enthusiastic or passionate about some study or another, but I never know if it went anywhere. These opinions and how it works. In addition to what I've always said which was, did these studies happen and how did it go? Because if a study happened that we were promoting and it worked really well and it gave us this information and it informed such and such decision, then it would be really good to know about. Yeah.
Well, Franny, the studies do happen, and they are reported out, usually at a board meeting, and so, and you're not going to get the readout in the following year for the next up UPWP, because the studies are usually being done for instance, the studies that were approved for the last UPWP, which that cycle ends pretty much the end of September. The proposal, they are beginning to do the final proposals for the studies, meaning the work plan. They're getting approved by the MPO board, and then they're done over the course of the following 8, 12, 15 months. And so that can inform maybe the selection in 2024 and 2025. But if you go back and look through the archives, you can generally find in the studies that were done and the results of the studies. And maybe I have some responsibility in not communicating to you all what happens in the UPWP working group meetings, because that's where a lot of the processing of input from the surveys and other means of giving comments on the universe of studies is done. And I know that last year, the year before, we got the universe. This actually was what Sandy called the proto-universe. And that was whittled down with, I thought, a minimum of input from anyone into the universe. And that's where the input, the survey, the polling takes place. And I know that polling happened this time. And And because I mean, I did it, and I think the advisory council did it. Actually, we did it a couple of times because I remember there was some protests the second time we did it. So we did get to comment on that. I think the problem then was that that universe was so small, that people were like, well, we didn't get to see the proto universe like we did last time, and now this universe is pretty small with stuff that wasn't particularly appealing. And so anyways, that's a long answer to your question, Franny. Steve.
Yeah, so I think the same thing you're complaining about happened at the UPWP meetings themselves. They spent a long time working up the universal set of possible projects, and then less time on choosing which ones they wanted. They asked all the UPWP members to serve, to rank all the projects, which they did. And then what came back was not only how they ranked it, but already the staff had a recommendation, seemingly very quickly. And that what happened was way too compressed. I think you need to spend more time deliberating on how to whittle down these projects, which means when that survey was released, then there should have been discussion on that, and the commenting from the advisory council on that, and then you get the staff recommendation, and there should have been a lot more time thinking about how the UPWP committee's ranking agreed with the staff ranking, and much more time to work out the differences and come to actual selection of them. That part was just done way too fast.
Yeah.
And then, Len, do you remember that?
Well, I do remember the staff having a recommendation, but I also remember the staff always having a recommendation after the survey is done, and then it's not the final word on it by any stretch. And I guess what we need to determine, Steve, is what we mean by too fast. Is it the number of meetings, or the amount of time?
Because, the number of meetings,
Yeah.
and of course, there's only so much time at a UPWP meeting to discuss it. So that just happened way too fast, and a lot of the UPWP members says, "Wait a minute, they couldn't follow along. It was happening so fast."
Yeah. Well, I think one of the Well, it was. Never mind. I'm trying to say something in an artful way. I'm having problems doing that.
If I remember correctly, I think we had about 3 meetings discussing the universe in its entirety, going through each study and discussing the benefits, the merits, the drawbacks, where staff could elaborate a bit more. And then we had at least 2 meetings as a committee to really go through the rankings and really sort of hash out priorities. And I do believe one of those meetings, if I remember correctly, was 2 hours in June. So if there is a need to, have more meetings, that's something we can definitely look at for next year. But the goal really is not to sort of force the process through fast. In fact, I believe development this year took much longer than it had previously, because of all of the meeting times that we had in March and April to really go through the universe and really make sure that we were being thorough in those discussions with the committee. But we are hoping to improve on that process this year. Just to go back briefly to a point about Sandy presenting the proto universe, we chose not to do that this year. That was a decision I made, as well as Sandy, because of the fact that that's about 76, 77 proposals that we've received, or suggestions, I should say, that we've received through our engagement. However, a vast majority of them were not suitable for consideration. One-liners, 6, 7 words of a proposal, that's not enough for staff to really go through and try and evaluate the merits of, and to try and, you know, build a scope out of, because ultimately these are work scopes that we're looking to fund. And so that from those discussions, that's how the kind of guidelines really came about, because our hope is to actually be able to take study proposals submitted by members of the public and then translate those to be as I guess, as honest to the original intent as possible, to then put into the universe and then bring to the committee for a discussion on funding. I am going to be perfectly honest. I am as the UPWP manager, I take your criticism, I take your feedback, and this is something that I'm hoping to do better next year. But oh, John, I just saw your chat. We started the UPWP process in February, I believe, which is how we had done it in the past, just basing off of what Sandy had told me. And our discussions kind of went from there. You know, I take your feedback. It was my first year doing it. It was a very unusual year for a lot of us, but we are hoping to do better, and we are hoping that we can bring RTAC into these conversations, and not in a rubber stamping role, but much more as an advisory council.
Thank you. I have one more request, but I see Andy hand up, and that'll be the last question or comment.
I have like 15 questions, but I'm not going to do them all. So I'm just looking through our past couple comment letters on the UPWP. I think there's two kind of programmatic areas that we've kind of the RTAC that we're concerned about. I think one of them is active transportation as a topic for some of the studies. And then I think climate resilience is another. Kind of feels like the past couple of years, you know, perhaps because there's already so much other funding programs or whatever kind of going on, that I think already be into implementation, and therefore there's not really planning studies in the UPWP for it. But actually, I kind of wanted to get a sense from you, Shalika, you know, are those two areas where maybe it would be helpful for us to brainstorm a little bit about what we would imagine as a good project for that kind of type? Or is there another area where you're actually fairly concerned about in terms of developing, you know, really successful UPWP discrete studies? And maybe that's something we could chew on as we think about how to, you know, also think about our process for feedback. Because, you know, seeing it pop up in 2 letters in a row, or for those 2 topic areas, is kind of a concern that, you know, hopefully there's something this year out there, but maybe if there's not, maybe we need to start thinking about what that means for, you know, potential projects, right? Is this something that needs an investment and attention? So kind of asking you, Shalika, here.
For sure. And it definitely is, you know, concerning that we didn't have studies to basically fund in those 2 areas. And personally, that's something that I really want to see in the universe as a study or multiple study proposals that are viable, that are feasible for staff to take on. So this is something, this is certainly an area that we would welcome study submissions for both active transportation and for resiliency projects. I will say though, a good amount of the studies that we ended up funding this year as discrete studies contained a lot of different elements of planning. There were resiliency elements, there are active transportation elements, there are equity elements. But I do get the point of having some more dedicated studies in those areas.
And so my request is the guidelines, you mentioned the guidelines, so can we get the guidelines?
They're posted on the website. They are
okay.
attached to the survey, and I think
Okay.
yeah, Stella just dropped the link in the chat.
Okay, great, thanks. You know, so we're 10 minutes behind the rundown, and I have like 15 minutes of padding, you know, in the agenda. I said saying it's going to be the last person. I see Jen and Stella's hand up. Stella, will you contact me to get me back on track, or what?
No, I actually, I'll be quick, but I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of what Andy and like we were just saying, I think Andy brought up a really good point, about some of the ways that, like, beyond just weighing in on the universe, RTAC can be involved in this process. I think, thinking about how studies are submitted and what sorts of studies we want to see submitted and from whom is one of those areas. And that's kind of like, I think what we're getting at with that last question up there as well is like, I'd really love to take some time in future meetings to talk with you all and think more about, how, as kind of the official public engagement arm of the MPO, this group can really help us think about the best ways to get the word out. We're looking for, more submissions from advocates, from members of the public, from, diverse groups, and I think, it would be really valuable to have your input on how we can better accomplish that and just kind of see more ideas from more places coming in that then we can look at as a group and move on from there. So just wanted to put that out there, and would love to talk more about that in future meetings.
Sure. Well, maybe we can put UPWP on every MPO meeting. And if we start running over consistently, maybe I can get 15 more minutes out of the group meeting for our monthly meetings. So Jen, you are going to be the last one on this topic.
Thank you. Yeah, no,
Sure.
sorry, I'll be quick.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm curious whether, and it sounds like we're kind of headed in that direction of like talking about this more in the advisory council. And I wonder whether either in some sessions at the advisory council or also potentially, like, I know we have those like tip day, I can't remember what they're called. There are times where people who want to move forward a tip project from a municipality can talk directly to MPO staff and kind of workshop how to go about it, because it is kind of a process. And I think the UPWP is inviting to many people because it seems like it's less of a process. Like anyone can have a study idea. You don't need to have like funding already or like a 25% design or whatever. But at the same time, like, I think it is a tough balance because you both, like, it's really hard to just go from just an idea and then pull together a scope and whatnot. So I totally empathize with what I feel like it has to do with some of these, different types of input. But I wonder if maybe there's an opportunity to have like an opportunity for members of the public and members of RTAC to like come and talk to MPO staff and kind of workshop together different study ideas to kind of make them from a very embryonic thing to a little bit more viable and competitive. And because I found that type of thing helpful, and maybe it could be one-on-one, or it could also be like a group of 2 or 3 people who like kind of bounce ideas off of each other and kind of collaborate in that way. So put that out there.
Sure, thanks. That's a good suggestion. I do like that. I think that's something maybe Stella, you, me, and Jonathan can probably talk about. Anyone is welcome to shoot me an email and we can set up a call to really, if we want that like one-on-one conversation. But if we want to do like a tip readiness day type of open house sort of thing, I think that's something we can definitely look into.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're going to boogie along here because we're really behind schedule. So thank you, and we're going to move on now to the elections. It was brought to my attention that we maybe have not officially closed the nomination process, and so that'll be a little bit of kink into this, but so I guess I'm going to turn it over to you, Stella, and maybe you can ask if there are any other nominations, and then we can go into the voting process.
Yeah, sure. My apologies for kind of the confusion here. It was my impression that the nominations were happening kind of in the span of the last meeting, before and during, but please correct me if I'm wrong on that.
I see David.
I see your hand up. You are the bylaw
Yeah.
expert.
So David, so David.
Hi.
Yeah.
Speaker.
Yeah, my internet is completely.
Am I being recognized?
Yeah, you are, David.
Okay. Yeah, I believe we did speak to that at the last time. The way the bylaws are written, it says that the nominations close at the close of that meeting, of the last meeting we had. And so we do not have the ability to make new nominations at this meeting.
Okay, great, thanks. So then, I just saw something in the chat regarding it and I couldn't call, so figured I'd bring it up as opposed to ignoring it. So Steve had his hand up and now it's down. So I guess we're all, Steve is thumbs up on Dave's interpretation. So, or at least thumbs up on he's okay with not being called. So, so with that, I think we can move into the election.
Okay, so I believe we have, let's see, it looks like we have just over 2/3 of our voting membership has voted in the survey. If you have not, I can paste the link again right now. I believe the folks who aren't here have already filled it out, but are there any kind of final questions or comments about the process before we kind of get into the results? Not seeing any. I appreciate the feedback. There was an opportunity on that form to provide feedback about the voting process, so I appreciate what you sent in. Okay, so I will, sorry, just copying the link here. Pasting it one more time, just in case. But to get into it, I don't think it will come as a huge surprise that the results point to the election of Len as chair and Franny as vice chair. As I said, that is just over 2/3 of the voting membership has filled in votes for those two. So I would say that we have our results there. Does anyone have any questions? I mean, you know, I apologize, it's the first time I'm going through this process, so I hope I'm doing it justice and doing it correctly, but congratulations to you both.
Thank you. I'd like to say, I'd like to think I'm swept in as vice chair with the votes yesterday.
Yes, it was good timing. You were elected during the election.
There you go. There you go. No, thanks. Well, folks, well, thank you really for the opportunity again. You know, I'm enjoying this immensely. You know, it's such a great learning opportunity. You know, and I think, you know, I think the advisory council is making good progress in becoming even more of a collaborator with the rest of the board, you know, and I'm looking forward to the next year. I didn't put down a whole lot of things that I want to accomplish, you know, but it's more than what was on the letter, and we'll see. But what I feel good about though is I will fall short, but I intend to be around, you know, long after I'm not chair. And as I said, one of the goals is to really find someone who really wants to be chair, to work with them, and to get them more up to speed so that when they take over next year, they're ready to go. And for anyone who's thinking about it, all I'll say is go to the MPO calendar before every meeting and find those PDFs and read them. You just try reading them. It may be hard in the beginning, it may take a long time in the beginning, but you'll get faster at it, you know, and there's just no substitute for reading. And so that's it. So thank you. So with that, we're gonna try and get us back on schedule.
Did David
yeah?
have a final question there?
Oh, okay. Sorry, David.
Yeah, I thought we might want to clarify for the record the term that everybody's just been elected to, because there was that confusion about having sort of started a little later than normal. But maybe we just want to specify it's from now until whenever you think it's until.
Okay, all right. Well, we were going to head into the discussion of bylaws changes, and so right now we're going to go with the status quo. We haven't changed anything. So we had made a mistake and did this a month late. So right now, the plan is to have that election in October, to start the process in July, because we haven't changed anything in the bylaws, so we'll discuss potential changes, but until we make those changes, the current rules apply. Would you agree with that, David?
That sounds great.
Okay.
And
Great.
I'm sorry that I've been sort of cryptic here. I started this meeting I had to be in a car and I can't figure out how to get out of safe driving mode. So I'm struggling to really feel like I'm participating with you all. But other than that, it's been a great meeting.
It's fine. The audio is what matters most. If you can hear us and you can hear us, if we can hear you and you can hear us, we're pretty much set, and don't get into an accident trying to get your phone out. Safe driving.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
All right.
All right.
All right. Well,
So then I'm just going by memory, but it's November 1st to November 1st is the term, correct?
yeah. So if the election's in October, then it's
Yeah.
November 1st.
So the election's late, it was still October 1st, it's still November 1st and November 1st.
But what we talked last week about possibly this year changing the bylaws so that it happens a little bit later
Yeah.
in the future. But
Yeah.
Well, maybe we'll get to that, but I just
for
say
now, it's
the
exactly.
November 1st and November 1st means it coincides with the actual elections of the MPO members,
Right.
which is a good thing. So
Yeah, which is a good thing. I agree. Yeah, I agree. So now we'll slide on into the bylaw discussion of bylaw changes. So I had a briefish conversation with David Montgomery about this, and when I had another closer read of the bylaws. I do like the fact that we started the process in July. I said earlier the last time that starting it in July was problematic because most people, there's very little activity in August. And so then we get to September, probably not really having made a decision. And then we're trying to have the election in October. And I think if we do want to stay with November 1st and November 1st to coincide with MPO, which I think is a good goal, then I think we just have to be really more committed to the process being in July and starting July and working through August. But I just know that there's the will. You can say all you want that you're going to do stuff in August, but when people aren't around, you just can't get anything done, and so usually these things are pretty smooth, but in my first term, I know there's a lot of back and forth as we were trying to get the two people who were interested in doing the job to come to some kind of uncontested conclusion, and that takes a while. And so I guess I really want to allow the space for that. Now we did that with the current rules. So I guess there's nothing to say that it would be a problem next time. And so just because we started late because of lapse of attention to the process doesn't mean that the process needs to change. Maybe it just means that those of us who are in charge need to pay closer attention, and I'm fine with that. So that's the first point. And I'm going to stop here because I want to make a second point. Steve?
To answer that, if that's a problem starting in July when everybody's gone away, the simple answer is start in June. In June, you should really be thinking about who's going to take over and start talking to people. So the process is like June, July, and August, really. And then the nominations go in September. So, you just have to remember that's when to start the process. That's all.
Yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, that's right. You can start in June. I said that's a nice, simple, elegant solution, Steve. Thank you. I like that. David, is your hand still up or is it back up? I think it's just still up. So then the other thing I wanted to suggest that we consider is 2-year terms instead of 1-year terms for the positions. Because I know that after my first year, I felt as if I was just beginning, to exit First Speed, first year, and I was really happy for the opportunity to have a second year to just kind of go through the cycle again, because it's like it is a cycle. It's a yearly cycle that's inside of a 4-year cycle for the LRTP, but that yearly cycle is the most important cycle, that SCIP cycle, the UPWP cycle, and so I think it is almost a disservice to the person in the chair position to be kind of take them out after 1 year, especially if they want to stay. If they don't want to stay, it's fine, but if they want to stay, then I think it would really benefit them and us from the continuity by having it be a 2-year term. And also it just kind of makes the process a little easier on us, in that we're not going through the process of nomination election every year. So I just want to put that out there for us to think about. So we're not going to make any decisions now. We'll have this discussion next month, perhaps maybe 10 minutes to discuss it, until we feel that either we need to drop this into an elections committee or a bylaws committee, or we decide that as a group we're ready to move. So I see Annie's hand and then Steve's hand.
So I think the only question that I have is if it is a 2-year term, I'm looking at the bylaws right now. I don't think we have spelled out a process for a special election in case somebody does need to, take leave of the committee for any reason. Maybe they move, whatever, or some process to just handle what happens between the kind of elections. Really, clearly spells out. I think when elections are every year, it's pretty easy to then just maybe wait for the next regularly scheduled election. But if it is quite a while, I think that is a concern, and we should probably think about, how we would suggest how to handle that situation.
Yeah, well, we shouldn't probably. We must definitely. So yeah, I hear you. Thanks for bringing that up. So Steve.
Yeah, so I think we should, you stick to it every year. First of all, you're worried about forgetting about to do the elections. If you do it every other year, the probability that 2 years later you're going to forget or get behind is even greater. So I think doing it every year and getting that down pat is a good thing. And if you in the past, and I'm looking at the long history of chairs of this organization, because I've been involved in this organization definitely over 25 years. A lot of the chairs do go for two terms, and not that many. Some do. It's up to the person. So I think you need that flexibility. Plus, you're also electing the vice chair, and the vice chair in the past used to move up from vice chair to the chair on a regular basis, and that stopped happening a while back. And so it gives an opportunity to make sure after the end of that 1 year, if the chair wants to go for a second year, you want to make sure, okay, is the vice chair really going to be there at the end of that year, or do we need a new vice chair? So there are a lot of considerations. I think you have much more flexibility, and it's able to fit whoever happens to be there in their particular circumstances. So I don't think we should be changing this.
All right, those are good arguments. So it's up for discussion. I do have strongish feelings about it. I just voiced but I don't have a response to Steve that's other than repetition of what I said. I can't extend my argument. So we'll just leave Steve with the last and good word on that. But we'll circle back to this topic, at another meeting to decide whether or not we are really fine with the status quo, or whether we want to try to do something different. Jen?
Just wanted to offer maybe a third in between alternative. For a lot of our consulting contracts, we have this is a 1 year with 2 extensions where it can be renewed, where we don't need to bid something out again. So I wonder if there's a thing where it's there's the automatic, you're definitely committing to 1 year, and then at your discretion as a chair, if you want to do your second term, you can, but that there's still a trigger to look into it and confirm that you definitely want to do that, so people don't get we don't lose the opportunity to do that and get out of the 1 year cycle. So anyway, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, that's an alternative. So it's kind of nice.
But I say given that this is not a big election process, you're not putting signs out on the lawn and things like that. So, to have them run the second year gives you that flexibility to run every year. And if someone wants to, after serving 1 year, wants to run for election again, it's not a difficult process and it's not difficult to get reelected.
Well, I just will have you know, Steve, that I was going to put out signs and I was told we don't do that at the MPO. So I guess ultimately you're right.
Yeah, Len, do we have like a Zoom background for you, like with your?
Yeah, this is pre-pandemic. It was pre-pandemic, but anyways, all right, we're closing in on that. I think we're done with discussion for now. We'll come back to this perhaps in a meeting or two. So I'm going to skip through the chair. Well, let me just quickly say the chair's report. Betsy Harvey did a really good presentation on an equity analysis, and I wasn't there to see it, but I've heard good things about it. I've certainly read a little bit of the report. It's a really good report. And so we will have Betsy come to visit us. And if not next month, then probably in January. And that's the highlight, I would say. There's another good corridor study too that was done, but we're actually going to do the Route 9 corridor study, if not next month, then in January. And so that's it for the chair's report. And in terms of minutes, I didn't see them, Stella, but if enough other people have seen them, and can
They
want to vote.
should be posted on the calendar. We can certainly postpone if folks
I saw them.
You did? Okay.
didn't have a chance. It's up to the group if folks didn't have time to review them. I think we
No,
can
if we have a
hold
vote,
off.
if we have a vote and a motion and a second, and enough people vote for it, we're set. And so, unfortunately, Jen, I think, can't make a motion. So I'll leave some of the other members. Okay, Franny?
I think I just realized why I didn't think the minutes were there, because it said meeting summary. And so I was looking for the word minutes. And so they are there. So, but I guess we
Sorry
can
about
wait.
the wording.
No, don't worry, but I just,
consistent
I
going
could, I could look through, I don't know if there are enough people to, if you'd rather wait till the next meeting or if there's enough people to,
And make a motion to wait.
okay.
Sure.
Yeah, and Anna Christina made a motion to wait and I'll second it, just.
Okay.
Okay,
Not a problem. We can bring these back to the next meeting.
okay. Do we have to vote on that motion?
Yeah, since well, in
I don't think we necessarily need to have a motion to wait.
yeah, to delay. Well, if it's a select board, Franny, we have to vote on everything, but we're not going to run it that stringently, so we'll just wait.
Okay.
So all right, so all righty, old business, new business. No hands, nothing. All right, so then we'll take a motion to adjourn in a second, and then I'll just say so moved.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Okay,
All right, without objection, and the meeting's over. And,
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
all.
Okay.
Bye.
Enjoy the
Thank you.
upcoming
Yeah.
holidays.
Happy holidays. Yeah, happy holidays. I'll stay on, Stella.
Congratulations, Franny and Len.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks, Scott. So all right, remind me, Scott, are you staying?
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
yeah, I'll see you.
All right. So I got I got so rushed at the end. I didn't really thank you. So
no worries.
I'm sorry about that. I was thinking we were going to go way past 4:15. So, but thank you a lot. I really
Oh, yeah.
appreciate it.